After 18 months of hard work, my dad shattered my thesis laptop just hours before it was due. He told me I didn't deserve a future, yet I graduated with highest honors. My name is Elise. I'm 24 years old, and my father slammed my laptop against my head 2 days before my PhD thesis deadline. I'd been pouring myself into that thesis for a year and a half. My mother just laughed from the corner as blood streamed down my temples. My dad stood over me, his face twisted in rage. "Your future? That's a joke," he spat. "You don't deserve a future. You're just a leech." I never imagined my educational journey would end like this. If you're watching this, you should know. I grew up in Millbrook, a small industrial town where the factory whistle dictated daily life more reliably than any clock. Our modest two-bedroom house on the edge of town, with its peeling paint, served as a constant reminder of what my father called realistic priorities. My father, Victor Morgan, had worked at the steel mill for 27 years. His calloused hands and perpetual scowl were the badges of what he proudly termed real work. In his eyes, education was a luxury for those too soft to put in an honest days. Labor, Mary and my mom, worked part-time at the local cafe when she wasn't keeping the house exactly to my dad's liking. She learned early in their marriage that disagreeing with him led to days of silent treatment or explosive arguments. She gradually became his echo, affirming his beliefs to avoid becoming his next target. Sometimes she'd even join him in ridiculing my intellectual interests, her nervous laughter a shield against his scorn. My older brother Andrew was the golden child, dropped out of high school during junior year to work alongside our father at the mill. "Now that's a real Morgan," Dad would say proudly at family gatherings, clapping Andrew on the shoulder. None of that book nonsense, just honest work. Andrew readily absorbed these lessons, mimicking Dad's views and demeanor. By 20, he had his own apartment and a steady paycheck, both of which my parents considered the peak of success. Meanwhile, I quickly discovered I loved to learn. Words fascinated me. Numbers held mysteries I longed to unlock. Science projects in our kitchen would make me lose all track of time until Dad stormed in, demanding I stop wasting food on silliness. Mrs. Whitaker, my third-grade teacher, was the first to notice. Elise has remarkable analytical skills. She told my parents during a conference they only attended because it was mandatory. Dad stared at the wall and Mom just nodded politely, both forgetting her comments before we even reached the parking lot. By 5th grade, I had won the district. Spelling bee. The local newspaper ran a small piece with my photo. I was beaming, clutching my certificate as other kids' parents snapped pictures. Mine never showed up. Had to work overtime, Dad claimed. I later overheard him telling Andrew it was silly to celebrate learning how to spell words a normal person could just look up. In 7th grade, my science project on local stream water quality earned state recognition. The principal personally called home to deliver the news. "That's nice," Mom said, in the same flat tone she used for the weather forecast. When I asked if they'd drive me to the state competition 2 hours away, Dad scoffed. "We're not wasting gas just so you can play scientist. It won't put food on the table." High school became my sanctuary. I joined every academic club I could find, staying after school until the very last minute before heading home. My English teacher, Mr. Callahan, lent me books from his own library. "Your mind is exceptional, Elise," he once told me. "Anyone dim your light?" Miss Rivera, my math teacher, stayed late to help me prepare for advanced placement exams. "College will open doors you can't even imagine," she urged. When I became valedictorian, the principal personally invited my parents. To the event, they didn't attend. Dad had planned a fishing trip with Andrew. Mom claimed to have a migraine. I delivered my speech in front of a crowd of strangers, fighting back tears, while other students embraced their overjoyed parents afterward. I stood alone until Mr. Callahan appeared with a small wrapped gift. It was a journal with the inscription, "Your journey has just begun. The world needs your voice." That night, I made a silent vow to myself. I would be the first Morgan to attend college. Not just any college, but the best one that would accept me. Education would be my escape from the limited future my family envisioned for me. Each dismissal of my achievements only solidified my resolve. Every scornful word strengthened the foundation of my determination. I secretly applied for scholarships, used school computers to complete applications since we didn't have internet at home, and set up a special email address my parents would never discover. To avoid receiving mail at our house, I had a teacher serve as my primary contact. While my peers shared their college acceptance letters with supportive families, I kept mine hidden under a loose floorboard beneath my bed, pulling them out at night to reread by flashlight, my fingertips tracing the embossed institution logos like treasure maps to another life. As my family celebrated my high school graduation, Dad simply remarked, "So, you start at the mill next week, right?" When I finally mustered the courage to tell them about my full scholarship to State University, the silence lasted 10 agonizing seconds until Dad slammed his plate against the wall. "Do you think you're too good for honest work? Is your family not good enough for you? Books and theories don't feed people, Elise. Real work does." Mom just stared at her lap, and Andrew smirked, saying, "Always knew you were weird." That night, I packed what little I had, knowing the bridge I was crossing was burning behind me. Despite the fear twisting in my stomach, each item I packed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd never truly seen. My first day of college orientation felt like I'd stepped onto another planet. Families helped unload cars filled with dorm supplies, mothers fussing over bed arrangements, and fathers assembling furniture. I arrived alone on a Greyhound bus, carrying one suitcase and a backpack with everything I owned. The scholarship covered tuition and basic room and board, but nothing extra. No spending money, no laptop, no extra clothes or supplies. "Are your parents coming later?" Leah, my roommate, asked, as her mother organized their closet and her father set up a mini fridge he'd bought as a surprise. "They had to work," I lied, "the first of many over the next 4 years." The truth was too complex and painful to share with these strangers whose parents hugged them goodbye with tears and proud smiles. The first semester was the hardest adjustment. Without a laptop, I spent hours in the computer lab typing papers while other students worked comfortably from their dorms. The financial aid office helped me get a work-study job in the cafeteria. But the hours were limited, and the income barely covered basic needs. I took a second job waiting tables at a cafe near campus, working nights and weekends while trying to maintain the GPA required for my scholarship. 3 weeks into October, my carefully planned budget crumbled when I got strep throat. The doctor's appointment and medication drained my meager cash. With nowhere else to turn, I swallowed my pride and called home. Mom answered, her voice immediately. "Guarded? Is everything all right?" she asked, implying, "Are you finally giving up on this college nonsense?" "I'm a little short on money this month," I explained. "I got sick and had some medical bills. I was wondering if I could borrow $100 until my next paycheck." The silence lasted until Dad picked up the phone. "Hey, we already have money problems. Welcome to the real world, college lady. Maybe now you'll understand what real responsibility feels like." He hung up without another word. That night I slept in my car for the first time, unable to afford both my prescription and my share of the dorm expenses. Leah had family visiting, so I made excuses to stay with a friend to avoid shame. I spent 2 weeks alternating between the back seat of my 15-year-old Honda and the 24-hour university library, showering in the gym before class. Nobody noticed. I became invisible, just another exhausted student among thousands. By Thanksgiving, most students had gone home for the holiday. I took on extra shifts at the diner, earning double pay and generous tips from customers who felt sorry for the poor college girl working on a holiday. With that cash, I was able to secure a small studio apartment off campus at a lower rate than the dorms. It was in a rough neighborhood, but it was mine. Despite these challenges, I excelled. Academically, my professors recognized my strong work ethic and intellectual curiosity. Dr. Patel, my introduction to psychology professor, was the first of many mentors who would shape my academic path. After I submitted a paper on the psychological effects of economic uncertainty on family dynamics, she invited me to stay after class. "This analysis shows remarkable insight," she told me. "Have you ever considered majoring in psychology?" That conversation opened up a world of new possibilities. Psychology offered a framework for understanding my own experiences. As I studied family systems, attachment theory, and resilience factors, I saw parallels in my own childhood. Knowledge became more than just an escape. It was also a source of healing. By sophomore year, I'd established a demanding but sustainable routine that included morning classes, afternoon library study sessions, evening work shifts, and late-night homework. I survived on ramen noodles, free campus event food, and the rare lunch a professor bought me during academic discussions. To save money on utility bills, I learned to scout out buildings with the best heating in the winter and air conditioning. In the summer, junior year brought a research assistant position that paid more than my previous service jobs. Professor Whitmore chose me over dozens of applicants based on my academic performance, your perspective on socioeconomic factors. And family psychology is unusually nuanced, he told me. Most students your age only have a theoretical understanding of these topics. If only he knew how intimately I understood them. Each theory I examined illuminated another facet of my family's dynamics. Every academic paper I read helped me put words to experiences I had only felt before. By senior year, I had found my academic calling, researching how family environments influenced academic achievement and psychological development. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own family had become my most crucial research subject. I graduated summa cum laude with departmental honors. Several professors encouraged me to apply to graduate programs and provided glowing recommendations. When I received my graduate school acceptance letter, which included a teaching assistantship that would cover most of my expenses, I felt vindicated. I had proven myself against all odds. In a moment of optimism, I called home to share the news. Mom answered, sounding older than I remembered. I got into the graduate program at State, I added, trying to keep the pride out of my voice. Full funding and a teaching position. Oh, she paused. Okay, more school then. At least when are you going to get a real job? Mom, this is a legitimate job. I'll be teaching and doing research. Dad must have been listening on the extension because his voice abruptly cut in. So the perpetual learner keeps putting off growing up. Some of us have had real jobs since we were 16. But I guess that's beneath the professor wannabe. I ended the call shortly after, reminding myself why I had limited communication with them in the first place. Still, some childish part of me longed for approval. Recognition that what I had done was worthwhile. That hope now seemed as unrealistic as expecting water from a stone. With graduate school approaching, I needed to find affordable housing near the university. However, the teaching stipend would barely cover essentials. After calculating expenses, I made a tough decision. I'd rent a small apartment in my hometown, 20 minutes from the university. The rent was far lower than university area apartments, and I could manage the commute. I told myself it was all about the money, but maybe a part of me still craved the family connection I'd never truly had. Graduate school intensified every aspect of academic life. The coursework became more challenging. Expectations rose, and the competition grew fiercer. Yet, for the first time, I felt completely in my element. My college struggles had prepared me for this pressure in ways my wealthier classmates were only beginning to appreciate. My research focused heavily on family psychology specifically, the impact of parental attitudes toward education on children's academic achievement and self-esteem. Every research paper I produced revolved around this theme, exploring it from various theoretical perspectives. My professors noted the exceptional depth of my analysis. Most students your age approach these topics theoretically, Dr. Halverson said about one of my papers. Your work shows a remarkably nuanced understanding of the lived experience. If only she knew how personal this research was to me. Every statistical correlation I examined mirrored events from my own childhood. Every case study contained echoes of my own experience. I was both the researcher and the subject, but I kept this fact hidden under academic jargon and scientific rigor. 3 months into the program, my carefully managed budget collapsed when my car needed significant repairs. The teaching salary barely covered rent, utilities, and food, leaving nothing for emergencies. After exhausting all other options, I reluctantly called my parents. I just need a place to stay for a month or two while I save for a new car, I said, hating the vulnerability in my voice. I can pay some rent, help with chores, and I'll be at the university most days anyway. To my surprise, they agreed without much argument. Dad grumbled about coming back with your tail between your legs, but Mom seemed almost pleased to have me back home. Maybe, I stupidly assumed, time had softened their attitudes. Maybe my dedication would finally earn their respect. The first week went surprisingly smoothly. I set up a small workspace in my old bedroom, which was mostly used for storage now. I made it a habit to leave early for the university and return late, limiting our interaction time. Mom would occasionally leave plates of food in the fridge with my name on them. Dad kept his opinions to a few muttered remarks about career. Students, but nothing overtly aggressive. This fragile peace allowed me to focus on drafting my thesis proposal. My previous research had naturally led me to this topic. Educational resilience in first-generation college students, family dynamics, and psychological coping mechanisms. My thesis committee enthusiastically approved it, citing its potential. To better understand barriers to higher education access, Dr. Halverson agreed to be my primary advisor, offering invaluable guidance and support. As I established my research method, the initial phase went well. I conducted literature reviews, developed survey questions, and received Institutional Review Board approval for human subjects research. I organized interviews with 21st generation college students, carefully selecting individuals whose experiences offered diverse perspectives on my topic. Each interview lasted 2 to 3 hours and provided rich qualitative data that both confirmed and complicated my initial hypotheses. As the workload increased, so did tensions at home. What started as subtle digs turned into daily comments about my obsession with schooling and worries about when I'd join the real world. Dad was especially bothered by my laptop, which represented everything he despised about intellectual pursuits. Staring at that screen all day will rot your brain, he'd say, purposefully blasting the television while I was working. People who type for a living are just pretending to work. Mom reverted to her usual pattern of passive reinforcement. Your father just wants what's best for you, she'd reply to particularly harsh statements. Perhaps a comfortable office job would be better than all this stress. Simpler. Simpler. As if I craved simplicity. As if I hadn't spent my entire life fighting for a simple escape. My brother Andrew started visiting more frequently. When I was deep in thought, he'd burst into my room without knocking, ask irrelevant questions, or remind me of family obligations I'd supposedly neglected. Each interruption drained vital time and mental energy as I struggled to regain my focus. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. I started working through the nights when the house was quiet, grabbing a few hours of sleep in the early morning. Before commuting to the university, the physical and emotional exhaustion mounted, but my resolve only grew stronger. Every obstacle they put in my path fueled my determination to complete my thesis, to prove once and for all that their narrow view of my worth was wrong. 6 weeks before the submission deadline, Dr. Halverson reviewed my paper and provided crucial feedback that required significant revisions. Your analysis is solid, she said, but you need to reorganize your conclusions to better align with the theoretical framework. These connections are implicit in your work, but they need to be explicit. This setback was compounded by technical issues that corrupted some of my backup data. I lost several days of work, forcing me to reconstruct complex statistical analyses from memory and scattered notes. The pressure mounted as the deadline approached, with seemingly insurmountable problems. Every day, I felt the thesis slipping. Further from completion, the night I overheard my parents discussing me in the kitchen was the turning point. I came downstairs for coffee, hoping to stay up for another all-night writing session. Their voices drifted from around the corner. She thinks she's so smart with all those books and big words, my dad said. What good is a fancy degree if you're still living with your parents at 24? Andrew got his own place at 19. I worry about her, Mom said, not in defense, but in agreement. All this schooling, and for what? No husband, no kids, just papers no one will ever read. Waste of time and money, Dad concluded. Should have gone to work after high school like a normal person. I retreated quietly to my room, their words searing like venom in my chest. The weight of them pressed down on me. I could almost feel each sentence embedding itself deeper in my mind. With newfound motivation, I worked for 20 hours straight, fueled by coffee and fury. The hours blurred, and the world beyond my screen disappeared. My fingers flew across the keyboard with mechanical precision. By the time daylight broke, I had rebuilt the lost analysis and incorporated most of Dr. Halverson's recommended changes. My thesis was 90% complete. Only the final touches remained, with 48 hours to submission. That morning, Dad intensified his interference. He barged into my room every 30 minutes, making minor demands or comments. Each intrusion was like a hammer shattering glass, splintering my concentration. It took me longer and longer to gather my thoughts again. Mom joined in, but more subtly. She insisted on breaks to eat meals I didn't want, or to help with household tasks that couldn't wait. "Your thesis will still be there tomorrow," she responded dismissively when I mentioned the deadline. "Family comes first." The last 24 hours were a battle of wills. I had retreated to the dining room table, the only place with enough space for my reference materials. My notes, research articles, and drafts were meticulously organized. Dad deliberately turned on the television in the adjacent living room, blasting a sports channel. The sound echoed through the walls. When I asked him to lower it, he launched into a tirade about ungrateful children. My house, my rules. I toiled all night, finishing the last adjustments as sunlight began to stream through the curtains. Only formatting and one final proofread remained. The submission deadline was noon. I felt exhausted yet triumphant. I had overcome every obstacle they had put in my way. The thesis was excellent. It was truly groundbreaking work with significant contributions to my field. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of pride. When Dad walked into the dining room, coffee mug in hand, everything changed forever. The morning of my thesis submission day began with a deceptive calm. Birds chirped outside my window. Sunlight filtered through the cheap blinds, creating faint patterns on the cluttered floor. I'd been awake for over 36 straight hours, fueled by black coffee and sheer willpower. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, but a sense of accomplishment outweighed the exhaustion. Just a few more hours, I reminded myself. With just a few more hours and 18 months of work, my thesis would be complete. The house was quiet, too quiet. I tiptoed into the kitchen for my 5th coffee refill. The microwave's digital clock glowed 7:06 a.m., less than 5 hours remained until the noon deadline. I just needed to finish the final proofread, format the references to academic standards, and assemble the submission package. If nothing went wrong, I'd finish with plenty of time to spare. My workspace was set up on the dining room table. I had moved there the previous evening after Dad took over the living room for a loud basketball game. My references and notes were neatly arranged in piles, each representing a section of my thesis. My laptop, an old model I'd bought secondhand, with my teaching stipend, hummed steadily as it processed the massive document. The first sign of trouble came around 7:30 a.m. when Dad emerged from his bedroom. On his days off, he usually slept until around 8 a.m. His early appearance immediately sent alarms through my mind. He paused in the kitchen doorway, eyes narrowed as he surveyed my workspace. "Still playing student, I see," he said, his voice carrying that familiar dismissive tone. "Normal people are heading to work right about now." I bit back the retort that instantly formed in my head. "Just a few more hours," I reminded myself. "Don't engage, don't give him an excuse." "Good morning, Dad," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "I'll be done shortly. My submission is due by noon." He grunted and moved to the coffee maker. "Submission? Fancy name for homework. When I was your age, I already had a family." The words hung in the air like an ancient accusation. I'd heard them hundreds of times before. Today they barely registered. I turned back to my screen. Mom appeared next, her hair still in curlers. She pursed her lips as she scrutinized the dining room table. "All these papers everywhere," she said. "We need to set the table for breakfast." "I just need a few more hours," I explained, trying not to sound desperate. "It's due today. It's the culmination of 2 years of work." "Work," Dad sneered from the kitchen. "His typing isn't working. Let's try hauling steel beams in 100-degree heat. That's work." Mom placed a hand on my shoulder. To anyone else, it might have seemed supportive, but I felt the subtle pressure in her fingertips. "Surely you can take a quick break for family breakfast. We hardly see you anymore." The irony of this statement was almost laughable. For weeks, they'd complained about my presence, about my laptop, about my papers cluttering their space. Now, family togetherness was a priority, and it just so happened to be right when my deadline was looming. "I really can't stop right now," I stated firmly. "The formatting is extremely precise, and I need to concentrate." Dad appeared at the doorway, clutching his coffee mug tightly. "Your mom asked you to clear the table for breakfast. That wasn't a request." His voice had a deadly edge I recognized from childhood. That tone always preceded punishments and explosive anger. Still, I couldn't give in. "Not today. Not with everything at stake. I'll eat later," I offered as a compromise. "You and Mom can use the kitchen counter. I just need to finish this." His face clouded, ungrateful. "That's what schooling does. It makes kids think they're too good for family meals, too important to respect the house rules." Mom used her usual peacekeeping line. "Victor, please let her finish her school project. She can join us later," but her words lacked conviction. We all knew it. Dad slammed his mug down, spilling coffee over the rim. "Project. She's 24 years old and spends her time on school assignments while actual grown-ups work." I tried to ignore his voice, focusing solely on my screen. "Just keep working. Don't engage." Every minute of distraction was a minute lost, and the deadline was firm. Andrew showed up unannounced at 9:30. His visits had become unsettlingly frequent during my thesis completion phase, always coinciding with periods of intense concentration. It was as if he had an internal radar that detected when I was in the middle of something crucial. The front door opened without a knock. His booming voice instantly filled the house, shattering the fragile bubble of concentration I'd been trying to preserve. "Mom told me you were cooking, Dad," he said, dropping his keys loudly onto the counter, the sound echoing. He walked toward the dining room, peering over my shoulder without asking. His gaze flickered to the TV. "Are you still writing that paper? I thought you'd be done by now." "Thesis," I corrected reflexively, my eyes glued to the text. "Yes, I'm finishing it today." Andrew laughed briefly and dismissively. "Thesis, paper, homework, whatever. Same thing, right?" He didn't wait for a response. "Hey, did I tell you about my promotion at the mill? I'm the supervisor now. Full benefits, pension, the works." Dad's face lit up instantly, a reaction I'd never seen in response to any of my accomplishments. "That's my boy," he declared, beaming with pride. "Now that's a real job, real rewards. Enough of this degree nonsense that never ends." The contrast was almost physically painful. My chest tightened as if my father's words were pressing down on it. I had to physically stop myself from reacting by biting down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I took a long breath, refocusing my attention on my citations. I would not be baited. I would not give them the satisfaction of knowing their remarks were getting to me. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of calculated sabotage, passive-aggressive comments, unnecessary noise, and thinly veiled contempt. Mom came into the dining room repeatedly, dusting surfaces that didn't need cleaning. Dad cranked up the television volume in the living room every 15 minutes until I could hear the commentators as if they were standing right next to me. Andrew made loud phone calls directly behind my chair, pacing just enough to brush against my workspace each time he moved by. By 11:30, my nerves were frayed to the breaking point, but the finish line was in sight. The thesis was formatted correctly, citations verified, abstract polished, everything was ready. All that was left was a final save and submission via the university website. Was actually going to make it despite everything. Despite them, that's when the internet connection failed. I stared at the error message in disbelief. No connection available. I checked my phone, no service there either. With growing dread, I walked into the living room where Dad was sitting. In front of the television, his streaming service running flawlessly, high-definition picture included. "The internet is out in the dining room," I remarked, straining to keep my voice even. "I need to submit my thesis in the next 30 minutes. Can you check the router? He kept his gaze fixed on the television. The internet's working fine for me, but it's not working on my laptop or phone, I said, dread creeping into my voice. Please, this is critical. I need to submit by noon. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. Funny how these emergencies always revolve around your schoolwork. Never seem to have technical difficulties when it comes to helping your mother with chores. The realization came with chilling clarity. Have you done something to the internet? A faint, contented smile pulled at the corner of his lips. My house. My internet. Perhaps I turned on parental restrictions. Perhaps the dining area is suddenly a computer-free zone. Blood rushed to my face. My voice shook with the effort of restraint. I need to submit my thesis. This is my future, Dad, he laughed, and the sound was entirely devoid of humor. Your future? That's a joke. He stood up and loomed over me. What future does endless schooling provide? Andrew has a house, a promotion, a normal life. What have you got? A stack of papers no one will read, plus student debt. Mom appeared in the doorway, drawn by the rising voices. Instead of intervening, she remained motionless, her presence an implicit endorsement of his actions. I need to get this submitted, I said, moving for the router. I'll reset the connection myself. His hand shot out and gripped my arm, bruising it. You don't touch anything in my house without permission. Let go of me, I muttered, pulling my arm away. This is insane. I only need internet access for 5 minutes. Your work, he scoffed. Do you mean your excuse for avoiding real responsibility? Your lofty education, which leads you to believe you are superior to us? Something inside me snapped. This was never about my education. This has always been about your insecurities. You're threatened because I chose a different path. His expression contorted into pure rage. You ungrateful little. I cut him off. I am not ungrateful. I'm ambitious. I'm determined. And I will not let you destroy my future because you don't understand it. I turned and headed into the dining room to grab my laptop. If I had to drive to campus, I would. The 30-minute journey would probably make me late, but I had to try. I heard him follow, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. I reached for my laptop just as he entered. You think you're so much smarter than everyone, he continued, speaking dangerously quietly. So much better than your family because of your precious education. I didn't respond. I was entirely focused on gathering my materials as quickly as possible. Time was running out. Look at me when I'm talking to you, he said. I kept packing. I said, look at me. I turned, hugging my laptop against my chest like a shield. I need to go. We can discuss this later. There's nothing to talk about, he murmured, moving closer. You need to learn respect. You need to know your place. My place is not here, I said, the truth echoing through my own ears. It never was. Something shifted in his gaze, a terrifying spark. Later, I'd recognize it as the moment his need for control overshadowed everything else. In that instant, he was no longer my father, but a man who couldn't stand to be defied. Your future, he said, his voice eerily calm. That's a joke. His hand shot out at my laptop. For a split second, I thought he might just take it away, hide it until the deadline passed. A petty punishment. But I couldn't have predicted what happened next. He yanked the laptop from my grip with the force of decades of physical labor and savage fury. Our eyes locked for just a fraction of a second. There was no hesitation in his gaze, no moment of parental reconsideration, only hard, purposeful rage. The laptop then landed hard on the side of my head. The impact ripped through my skull like a bullet. Pain erupted instantly, white-hot and excruciating. The device's corner struck just above my right temple, and I felt the skin tear open. Warm wetness began running down my face. The blow knocked me backward until my shoulders slammed against the wall. My vision blurred and darkened at the edges. Through the haze, I saw my laptop fall to the floor, the screen separating from the keyboard with a horrible snap of plastic and electronics. 18 months of work vanished in an instant. You don't deserve a future, Dad said, hovering over me as I slid down the wall. You're just a leech. Most shocking sound came next. Laughter. My mom's laughter. She stood in the doorway, high-pitched and frightened, watching, not intervening, no call for help, no sign of maternal protection. Instead of assaulting his daughter, her husband simply laughed as if he'd delivered a slightly inappropriate joke. "Victor?" she finally replied, still chuckling. "That's enough now. Enough." Blood was already dripping into my eye. My thesis, graduate degree, and future were all in pieces on the floor. And for my mother, this was simply enough. Dad loomed over me, chest heaving, as if shocked by his own actions, but not at all sorry. "Clean yourself up," he said finally, "and clean up this mess too." He turned and walked away. Mom followed him like a shadow. The kitchen was filled with the mundane noises of coffee being poured and the refrigerator door opening and closing, as if nothing unusual had occurred, as if he hadn't just crossed an irreversible line. I stayed on the floor for several minutes, stunned and immobile. The throbbing in my head pounded with every heartbeat. When I finally touched my temple, my fingers turned scarlet with blood. The cut was deep enough that I'd probably need stitches. More immediately worrying were the nausea and dizziness, clear signs of a suspected concussion. With shaky hands, I gathered the shattered pieces of my laptop. The screen was connected by a single wire to the keyboard. The case was split, with plastic shards scattered like shrapnel on the floor. I tried to press the power button. Nothing. Not even a glimmer of life. The machine that held my entire academic career was dead. Panic sliced through the pain. I needed those files. There had to be some way. I stumbled to the bathroom, gripping the counter to steady myself. The mirror revealed an inch-long gash over my right temple. Blood was still flowing freely. My eye had already begun to swell, indicating a significant bruise by morning. I pressed a clean washcloth against the area and applied pressure. The bathroom light was blindingly bright, and I moved my head too quickly. The room spun. I should have gone to the ER, but the thesis deadline loomed larger than my physical well-being. Noon, less than an hour remained. I returned to the dining room, a washcloth pressed to my head. Andrew was now sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. "Dad really got you good," he said, without looking up. "Should have known better than to talk back." The casual way he acknowledged the assault without condemnation was almost as disturbing as the act itself. "I need to get my thesis files off this laptop," I replied, ignoring his comment. "Do you have a computer?" "I can use. I need to submit by noon." He laughed. "Are you still worried about homework since Dad pushed you to next week?" "Your priorities are off, sis. Please," I pleaded, hating the desperate tone in my voice. "This is my graduation thesis. Everything I've worked for. I just need to access the files." He shrugged. "Sorry, I left my laptop at home. Besides, that thing's toasted. No way you're getting anything off it." I knew he was right. The destruction was catastrophic. Still, I had to try. With trembling hands, I gathered the broken pieces into my bag. Blood continued to seep through the washcloth, and there was no time to treat it properly. I needed to leave. Mom appeared at the doorway as I prepared to go. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, as if I were a teenager violating curfew. Rather than an injured adult? "To the hospital, and then to campus," I said without looking at her. I couldn't bear to see the woman who had laughed while I was bleeding. "Your father is still upset," she explained, lowering her voice. "Maybe you should wait for him to calm down. You apologize for provoking him." The absurdity of her suggestion hit me like a second blow. Apologize for what? For seeking an education? For expecting basic human respect? For having my skull split open by my father? "Don't be dramatic, Elise," she groaned. "It was just a small disagreement that got out of hand. Family fights happen." "It wasn't a disagreement, Mom. This was an assault." Her expression stiffened. "Now you're just being ridiculous. Your father would never, he just did." I pointed to my injured head. "Look at me. Look what he did." She looked at my wound with chilling detachment. "You'll probably need a few stitches," can drive you to urgent care after lunch." The words tasted bitter, as if my deadline, career, and future weren't slipping away by the second. "I'm leaving," I stated firmly, gathering my bags, "and I'm not coming back." Dad's words resonated from the living room. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. Ungrateful children don't get second chances in this house." Mom's eyes pleaded and accused simultaneously. "See what you've started? Just apologize, and this will all be over." "No more," I replied. "Goodbye, Mom. You'll regret this," I heard her say. "When your fancy education leaves you alone with no family, you'll regret choosing books over blood." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. With my broken laptop clutched to my chest and blood still streaming down my face, I stepped into the blinding sunlight of a future that had suddenly become disconnected from everything I'd worked for. The dizziness hit me hard as I reached my car. Concussion symptoms worsened, making it hard to focus. My phone showed 11:40. No time to get to campus. No way to recover my files. No chance of an extension without proof. But for the first time in my life, I had no plan, and surprisingly, no dread. I started the car and drove away from the house that had been both a prison and a battlefield for the past 24 years. Whatever came next, I'd face it without being weighed down by their toxic expectations. Blood might be thicker than water, but it was never meant to be spilled by those who claim to love you. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes, my mind clouded by pain and shock. Blood had soaked through the washcloth, and the ache in my head intensified with each passing minute. Eventually, I arrived at Riverside Park, an empty public space on a weekday morning. I parked under a shady oak tree and finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had happened. The tears came quickly and violently. Great heaving sobs that seemed to come from some primal place I'd kept hidden for years. I cried for the little girl whose achievements were routinely ignored, for the teenager who hid college acceptance letters as if they were contraband, for the PhD student whose own father destroyed her work out of resentment and fear. Most of all, I cried for the daughter who had spent her entire life seeking acceptance from parents fundamentally incapable of giving it. My phone pinged, interrupting the breakdown. Dr. Halverson had sent an email. "Elise, it's noon. Deadline approaching. Please confirm submission status." Reality crashed back with devastating force. The thesis, the deadline, the entire academic future hanging in the balance. I checked the time, 11:52. With 8 minutes left, I was sitting in a park with a head injury and a destroyed laptop. It seemed hopeless. Then something shifted inside me. A strange calm descended, displacing panic and despair. If my family taught me anything, it was resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. I'd spent my entire life overcoming their challenges. This was just one more hurdle, perhaps the most severe. First, I found a clean tissue in my glove compartment and applied it to my still bleeding temple. Then I quickly replied to Dr. Halverson, "Emergency situation. Heading to campus now? Please advise on late submission protocol." The response came almost instantly. "What kind of emergency? Are you okay?" I paused before deciding honesty was the only option. Physical injury requiring medical attention. Laptop destroyed. Cannot access thesis files. Will explain in person. I started the car and drove to campus gently to compensate for my dizziness. My phone was pinging again. Dr. Halverson had written, "Go to University Health. Services immediately. I'll meet you there. Don't worry about your thesis right now." Her concern, so different from my family's reaction, brought fresh tears to my eyes. I followed her directions, carefully navigating to the University Health Center. By the time I arrived, blood had soaked through the tissue and was running down my face again. The receptionist took one look at me and immediately directed me to an examination room. Nurse Gallagher, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and efficient hands, treated my wound while asking gentle questions about what had happened. I found myself telling her the plain truth. My father smashed my laptop against my head when I tried to submit my thesis. I said the words, and they sounded strange, even as I spoke them. Her hands paused for a moment before returning to their work. This injury is consistent with what you're describing, she explained carefully. I'm going to document everything thoroughly. The doctor will be here momentarily to see if you need stitches and check you for a concussion. I have a thesis. Deadline, I said, or had. It was noon. Your health comes first, Gallagher stated firmly. Academic deadlines can be extended due to medical emergencies. This definitely qualifies. Dr. Halverson arrived as the doctor was examining me. She took one look at my injury, and her professional demeanor faltered slightly. "Oh my God, Elise," she exclaimed. "What happened?" The doctor, who had just confirmed I had a mild concussion requiring for sutures, looked up. "Are you her professor?" Dr. Halverson nodded. Thesis advisor. "Your student has sustained a significant head injury," he said. "Concussion protocols need to be followed. No screens, limited cognitive strain for at least 48 hours. Of course, she replied promptly. The deadline is completely waived. We can discuss extensions after she's recovered. While the doctor prepared to stitch my wound, Dr. Halverson pulled a chair beside the examination table. "At least the nurse mentioned your laptop was used as a weapon. Can you explain what happened?" For the second time that day, I described the events leading up to my injuries. Dr. Halverson listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned. After I finished, she took a long breath. "First of all, your thesis isn't lost. You sent me a draft 2 days ago, remember? We have that version at least." In the midst of the chaos, a wave of relief washed over me. I had forgotten about the email. Second, she added, the university has protocols for situations like these. What happened to you is assault, and we need to report it. The university. Police station is right next door. Would you be willing to speak with them once your medical treatment is concluded? Paused. Filing a police report against my own father felt like a one-way street, but he had already crossed an irreversible boundary by attacking me. Yes, I finally said. I will report it. The next few hours were a blur of medical procedures and official statements. The doctor stitched my wound while outlining concussion. Recovery guidelines. The university police officer took my statement, photographed my injury, and documented the damaged laptop as evidence. The student services coordinator arranged emergency temporary housing in a graduate apartment complex, as returning to my parents' house was clearly not an option. Throughout it all, Dr. Halverson stood by my side, advocating for me with various university departments. She helped me secure an emergency deadline, extension for my thesis submission, and arranged for IT assistance to attempt data recovery from my destroyed laptop. The graduate school dean has approved a 2-week extension given the circumstances, she told me as we sat in the student services office. The IT department believes they may be able to recover your files from the hard drive, which appears intact despite the external damage. I don't know how to thank you, I murmured, overwhelmed by her kindness. You don't need to thank me, she said firmly. This is what academic communities are supposed to do, support each other. What happened to you is unconscionable, and ensuring you can complete your work despite it is the least we can do. Her words struck a deep chord. Support community concepts, so alien to my family's experience that they seemed almost mythical. Yet here they were, offering tangible help when I needed it most. By late afternoon, the immediate crisis was resolved. My wound was treated, a police report filed, temporary housing secured, and academic arrangements made. The IT department had taken my laptop and promised to attempt data recovery overnight. I was told to rest and follow concussion protocol, which included no reading or screen time for at least 24 hours. As Dr. Halverson walked me to my temporary housing, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Elise, is this the first time? Your father has used physical violence against you. Yes, I replied, the anger evident in my voice. The emotional abuse has been constant, but this was the first physical attack. She nodded thoughtfully. I suspected as much, based on your research focus. Many family psychology scholars are drawn to the field because of personal experience. Her insight was unsettling yet validating. Is it that obvious? Only to someone familiar with the patterns, she told me, your understanding of family. Dynamics has always been extraordinarily nuanced for someone your age. Now I understand why. We arrived at the apartment complex, and she helped me settle into the plain but comfortable emergency housing unit. Before leaving, she placed a business card on the counter. "This is the contact information for the University Counseling Center," she told me. "They have crisis counselors on call 24/7. Please consider calling them." Would daughter after better bread is traumatic, and processing it with professional help might be beneficial. After she left, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, drained both physically and emotionally. The day's events felt surreal and intense, like something from a dream. My head throbbed despite the pain medication, and my thoughts kept returning. To the moment, metal and plastic collided with bone, when blood poured down my face as my mother laughed. I picked up Dr. Halverson's card and the phone. Some burdens were simply too heavy to bear alone. The next morning, a university IT technician knocked on my door holding a small external hard drive. "We were able to recover most of your files," he explained. Despite the laptop's damage, the hard drive remained remarkably intact. "We've transferred everything to this external drive." I accepted it with trembling hands, a mix of medication, exhaustion, and profound relief. You have no idea what this means." "Just doing my job," he said, smiling. "The tech department wishes you a speedy recovery." After he left, I connected the drive to the loaner laptop provided by Student Services. There was my thesis, complete, except for the final few revisions I had made the morning of the incident. This was a miracle given what could have happened. Despite the concussion protocol's warning against screen time, I spent the next several hours completing the final formatting and edits. My head ached, and my vision momentarily blurred, but resolve trumped physical discomfort. By late afternoon, I had submitted the completed thesis through the university's website. Moments later, the confirmation email arrived. "The thesis has been received. Submission recorded." Those 5 words meant victory over every obstacle my family had thrown in my way. Despite their attempts to sabotage my education, despite physical and emotional assault, property destruction, and personal pain, I had succeeded. The thesis was submitted. The degree requirements would be fulfilled. The future they said I didn't deserve remained mine to claim. As I closed the laptop, a powerful realization washed over me. The very people who should have supported me instead tried to break me. Yet their hostility had forged the very resilience that allowed me to overcome. The harm they inflicted, the ultimate answer to their malice, wasn't hatred or revenge, but accomplishment on my own terms. With that clarity, I called the university's legal office to inquire about seeking a restraining order. To eliminate any possibility of retreat, some bridges had to be burned down, not merely crossed. My parents had made their choice. Now I was making mine. The physical healing began with 4 stitches above my right temple. The wound healed beautifully, leaving a small scar that would fade but never completely disappear. In some ways, it felt fitting, a permanent, visible reminder of the moment that severed my final connection to my family of origin. The concussion symptoms lingered for almost 3 weeks: headache, light sensitivity, and occasional dizziness, but they gradually receded as my brain healed from the blow. University Health Services monitored my progress with weekly appointments. The campus counseling center became a regular fixture in my schedule, with twice-weekly sessions that helped me process not only the assault, but also the years of emotional abuse that preceded it. My thesis defense was postponed by a month to allow for my recovery. When the big day arrived, I stood in front of my committee with the confidence that comes from having survived the worst and still standing. The questions were challenging but fair, and my answers were clear and well-reasoned. At the end, Dr. Halverson declared what I had barely dared to hope for: highest honors, a unanimous decision. Those words echoed in my mind as I walked across campus later. Highest honors. After all, I hadn't just succeeded, I had excelled. The external validation was gratifying, but more important was the internal knowledge that I had overcome tremendous odds. No external acknowledgement could compare to the strength I found within myself. The restraining order against my parents was granted uncontested. They did not appear in court, instead issuing a brief statement through their lawyer alleging I was always prone to hyperbole and attention-seeking behavior. The judge reviewed the medical evidence, police report, and photos of my injury before ruling their response concerning in its dismissiveness of documented assault. The order was approved for the maximum term, with the option to extend it if needed. As spring gave way to summer, the university delivered some surprising news. The department has an opening for a research assistant position with a modest salary and on-campus housing for the upcoming academic year. Dr. Halverson told me when we met to discuss the opportunity. Your thesis has garnered attention from several faculty members. The interplay of family dynamics, educational resilience, and first-generation student experiences is becoming increasingly relevant to our institutional goals. We'd like you to continue and expand upon this research. The position would allow me to remain in the academic environment where I had found support and purpose, while also putting my independence on a stronger footing. I accepted immediately. 2 months after the assault, while I was settling into my new campus housing and research position, an unexpected visitor arrived at my office door. Andrew stood awkwardly in the hallway, appearing both defiant and uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked, his usual bluster noticeably absent. I hesitated, my hand involuntarily reaching for the thin scar on my temple. "That depends on what you want." To say, he flinched at the gesture. "I'm not here to defend them," he replied immediately. "What Dad did was wrong. It's really wrong." The admission stunned me into silence. Andrew had always been our father's echo, endorsing every criticism and dismissal of my choices. "Mom and Dad told everyone you fell and hit your head on the table," he said, "but I saw the broken laptop. I know what happened, and you're just now admitting it." 2 months later, he looked down. "I should have said something that day. Should have stopped him or helped you later." I realized the apology was implicit rather than direct, typical of my family's emotional constipation in communication. Still, it marked a significant shift from our previous dynamic. "Why are you here, Andrew?" I asked directly. "I got you something," he explained, reaching inside his jacket pocket. He produced a small box and placed it on my desk. To replace what was broken, inside was a brand new laptop, far superior to the destroyed second-hand model. The gesture was both touching and insufficient, a tangible answer to a deeply rooted problem. "Thank you," I replied thoughtfully, "but a laptop doesn't fix what happened." "I know," he confessed. "Nothing really fixes it. Dad crossed a line that day. Mom, too, by her reaction." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "I've been thinking a lot about how they treated you versus me. How they always made your accomplishments seem insignificant while praising me for trivial things that was unfair." Andrew's recognition was seismic. He had benefited his entire life from the unequal distribution of parental approval, and acknowledging it required a level of self-reflection I didn't think he was capable of. "No, it wasn't fair," I acknowledged, "but it shaped who I am." "For better or worse?" "Mostly better, it looks like," he observed, looking around my university office with apparent admiration. "You made it despite them. Maybe even because of them in some strange way." His insight surprised me, but he was more perceptive than I gave him credit for. "Will you stay in touch?" he asked as he prepared to leave. "Not with them, just with me. I'd like to know how you're doing." I carefully considered the request. Andrew had participated in the family dynamic that led to the violence, but he was also a product of that environment, shaped by the same forces that had nearly destroyed me. "We can try," I said hesitantly. It was a small but significant opening. The ability to deliberately rebuild family connections on my own terms gave me a new kind of power. As my research position became more permanent, I started integrating my personal experiences into outreach initiatives for first-generation college students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Without disclosing the exact trauma, I was able to connect with students facing similar struggles: parental rejection, lack of support, and deliberate undermining of academic ambitions. Family resistance to your education often says more about their insecurities than your choices, I would tell these young people. Your pursuit of knowledge threatens their status quo, challenges their worldview, sometimes highlights opportunities they never had or choices they regret not making. This approach helped many students depersonalize their parents' objections, viewing it as a systemic issue rather than a personal failing. The opportunity to use my painful experiences to help others became the most unexpected gift of my journey. 1 year after the assault, I was invited to present my research at a national conference on educational equity. Standing on the stage in front of hundreds of educators and scholars, I felt a profound sense of validation. My father's attempt to discourage me had resulted in professional recognition, meaningful work, and a community that valued precisely what my family had discarded. Educational resilience isn't just about academic persistence despite socioeconomic barriers. Explained during my presentation, it's also about maintaining self-belief when those who should be your strongest advocates turn out to be your biggest obstacles. For many first-generation students, the most significant achievement isn't the degree itself, but the psychological fortitude required to pursue it in the face of deliberate discouragement from those whose praise they most crave. The subsequent standing ovation was gratifying, but the true reward came during the networking session that followed. When student after student approached me to express how my framework had helped them understand their own family dynamics, I had translated personal suffering into professional insight that could benefit others. There could be no greater victory over the narrative my parents had tried to impose. As for my parents, the distance I maintained proved to be the healthiest option. Andrew's occasional updates suggested they hadn't changed their stance, characterizing the assault as a misunderstanding and portraying themselves as victims of an ungrateful daughter. Their refusal to acknowledge the truth of what transpired only validated my decision to stay away from them. The most profound realization came gradually through both professional research and personal reflection. Their treatment of me had never been about me at all. My father's rage, my mother's enabling, my brother's initial complicity were all products of their own limitations, fears, and unrealized potential. Understanding this didn't excuse their actions, but it did release me from the burden of wondering what I could have done better to earn their acceptance. Nothing. The answer was nothing. Because their condemnation was never based on my choices or achievements. It was about how those accomplishments reflected back on them, about their own lives. My achievement became a mirror they couldn't bear to look at, so they tried to shatter it instead. By breaking away, I found the freedom to define family on my own terms. Colleagues who supported me through a crisis, students who shared their similar experiences, mentors who saw my potential when my parents didn't. These individuals became my chosen family, connected not by blood, but by mutual respect, shared values, genuine care for one another's well-being. 2 years after the laptop incident, I stood in my new apartment, hanging a framed copy of my master's degree on the wall. The small scar on my temple had faded into a thin silver line that was only visible if you knew where to look. Like so. Many other parts of that day, it had faded but not vanished, blending into who I had become rather than defining me. My phone chimed with a message from Dr. Halverson. The curriculum committee has approved your proposed course on family dynamics and educational resilience for next semester. Congratulations, Professor Morgan. I smiled at the title, Professor Morgan. My father had declared that I didn't deserve my future, but it was now undeniably mine. It's not despite his cruelty, but because of how it shaped me. Every challenge they threw at me only strengthened my determination. Every dismissal had fueled my ambition. The most profound lesson of my experience wasn't about familial trauma or intellectual perseverance, though both were important. Deeper truth was about the human capacity to transform pain into purpose, to convert rejection into the gold of self-actualization. We have no control over the families we're born into, but we can choose who we become and the families we create. For ourselves, have you ever faced opposition from those who should have supported you? How did you find the courage to pursue your dreams despite their discouragement? Thank you for listening. Take care. Good luck. Perhaps listening to today's story has prompted new questions or brought back old memories for you. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments spark new tales that connect us all. Everyone's life journey is unique, and we all try to interpret the world in our own way. These moments serve as a reminder that we are all humans, sometimes sad and always learning new things. If you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us because they inspire us to create even better content. Every story offers a distinct perspective, and our goal is to understand everyone's point of view to create diverse and relatable material. Stories like these remind us that everyone's journey through life is unique, and hearing other people's stories teaches us new things. You can also share your own experiences with us. We value your experiences too. If you enjoyed this video, please provide feedback. We strive to generate content that always brightens your mind and inspires you with fresh thoughts. If you've seen this video before, your feedback is still valuable. Every piece of input helps us enhance our material and provide our readers with a different viewpoint. Today, what we witnessed was only a fraction of the numerous stories shared on Reddit and around the world. It's a reminder that we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with one another. This video is just one example of how we use storytelling to connect with others and learn about various aspects of life. We aim to continue sharing stories that will help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and please keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more great content. Your support keeps us running, and we will continue to bring you thought-provoking and touching tales. Until next time, take care and stay curious.